Welcome to Days of Roar, the Detroit Tiger podcast, brought to you by the Detroit Free Press. My name is Mark Gorash. I am here with new Chicago native Tigers beat writer Evan Petzold, who has been in Chicago for a full week, watched a lot of fun baseball, did not visit my grandson. I should have been there to help him out with that. Ev, tomorrow you get to drive home. I know you're going to like that. But it's been a pretty fun week, and holy smokes, are the Chicago White Sox bad. Woo, dog, man, are they bad.
It's a really bad team, Mark. That is a really bad team. And it has been too long in Chicago. Always a good time, but I can't wait to get back home. Yeah, the Chicago White Sox are a really bad team. The Tigers handed them their 100th loss on Sunday. They are on pace for 123 losses. That's 3 more losses than the 1962 New York Mets, who had 120 losses in 160 games. Indeed, the Chicago White Sox are on pace for the worst record in modern baseball history. It is a terrible, terrible, terrible baseball team. Now, I will say, Wrigley Field, that was a lot of fun. Tigers went 1-2 in that series against the Chicago Cubs. That was my first time at Wrigley Field. The atmosphere was just electric. And then obviously 3-0 against the Chicago White Sox at Guaranteed Rate Field with one more game to play in the series on Monday night. So a 4-2 week this week, 1-2 against the Cubs, 3-0 against the White Sox with one more to play. The Tigers are playing some good baseball, but again, Mark, you mentioned it right at the top of the show. How bad are these White Sox, man? That is just a brutal team.
You know, I don't normally like to disparage other teams' coaching staff or strategies, but the other part about the White Sox being terrible is, look, Luis Robert Jr., good player. I saw some arms amidst them getting shelled. I was in love with Jonathan Cannon the first 2 innings because he pitches with an arsenal and backwards that's highly unusual, and it was tons of fun. Then they sequenced him into about, 3 terrible innings, left him in too long, but he intrigued the hell out of me. The left-handed reliever, Eller, good fastball, good slider, located it on the edge. Yeah, I mean, but you get lost just in the terribleness of the players they're putting out on the field. Besides, of course, next year's Triple Crown winner, Lenyn Sosa, who seemed to have a career series so far against the Detroit Tigers. While he came into the series hitting 208, I did notice he was up to 220. And he was making defensive plays, that reminded everyone of Ryan Sandberg in his prime. So, but yeah, oh my goodness, man.
The White Sox general manager, Chris Getz, he's got a lot of work to do. He has a lot of work to do to steer this thing in the right direction. And it's not going to be an overnight fix. They're not going to pull a Kansas City Royals with the pixie dust and sprinkle it on the team, and suddenly Bobby Witt Jr. emerges, as do some good free agent signings, and suddenly they're back into it. No, this is going to be a long process, and I think the White Sox are going to be bad for a really long time. It's going to be a minute before they can get things turned around. But the Tigers, Mark, we got to talk about it. They're 10-3 in their last 13 games. They're 27-20 in their last 47 games. And if you want to go all the way back to June 15th, last 96 games, they are 51-45. How do we feel about how they've been playing recently? Obviously, the 3 games against the White Sox, I guess you know what? Every team plays their schedule, and you're going to have bad teams on the schedule, and you got to take advantage of those opportunities when they come. Every team does that. How are we feeling about how the Tigers are playing recently? 10-3 in their last 13, 27-20 in their last 47.
A lot more fun, a lot more of the real players. And if you're a baseball person, I won't disparage this next comment, but the White Sox are kind of a slump buster, don't you think? I mean, So if you know what a slump buster is, God bless you. But the teams can be a lot better when Riley Greene and, Kerry Carpenter are in the lineup, along with future batting champion Colt Keith. Yeah, the team looks a hell of a lot better. Let's also, because you and I just could not understand for almost 8 months of baseball, we could not understand why Zach McKinstry was on the baseball team, and he has put together his second major league caliber month of the last 11 months. He's been a Tiger, hitting well over 320, knocking in runs, including a home run, and it just goes to show you The White Sox are really bad.
It's a bad team. And let's not forget, let's not sleep on your favorite, Matt Vierling, as well. If we're going to give hat tips, and we're tipping the cap to Zach McKinstry for another good month, his first good month since last May, we got to tip the cap to Matt Vierling for what he's done this season. I know you haven't always been the biggest fan of him, Mark, and he's shoving it all up in your face this season with the way that he's been able to not only handle third base, which again, not a great third baseman, but he can play there in a pinch, gives you all three outfield positions, but also, let's not forget Matt Vierling, 109 hits, 23 doubles, 5 triples, 15 home runs. He's batting .258 with a .745 OPS. He's been healthy. He's available. That is the greatest quality, is being available. Matt Vierling has been a good player for the Tigers this year, and I think he deserves a little bit more credit than maybe we've given him or you've given him in the past.
Listen, all I can say to you is when you use the qualifier of he's been available, it reminds me of my sophomore year girlfriend, okay? So, all I got to say to you is, yes, those are really good things. Matt Vierling's going to get close to 600 plate appearances. Kudos to him. He has not been terrible, but, I tip my hat. He's had a better year than I anticipated him having. I'm not going to discuss his defense at third base because if he played regular third base, he would have the worst defensive runs saved in Major League Baseball. He has a 5%.
He's a solid role player on a good team, by the way. I didn't think that he was going to reach that potential. I thought, hey, look, the Phillies traded him away because, they had other players that could be better role players than him on a winning team. I think Matt Vierling has proven that he can be a good role player on a winning team. I don't think that he needs to be a guy that's starting every single day. But I think if you pick and choose the matchups and you're able to give him opportunities where he's going to get that ball in the inner third of the plate against certain starting pitchers, and you want to put him in games where he's going to get those types of pitches on the inside part that he can turn on and hit for some damage. And then also, if there's opportunities to slap the other way, we know he likes to sit the ground ball single the other way is the Matt Vierling special. That's always been the way. And now he's gotten into the pull side. Moving forward, if you can find opportunities for him to start and against certain pitchers, I think there's a ton of value in Matt Vierling as a really good role player on a winning team. That's a really good development for this squad as they look to build a winner. To have good role players who can contribute on a winning team, you need those kind of guys just as much as you need the star players.
All right, so before we get into the big two, let me ask you a question. It's kind of a loaded question, but it's a good question. If I said to you right now, what do you think? Give me the odds. The bench on opening day 2025, 4 players. 4 players are Dillon Dingler, Zach McKinstry, Andy Ibanez, and Matt Vierling. Would you say that's likely, unlikely? You'd like that? You wouldn't like it? Give me a fast 30 seconds on it.
I'd have to really evaluate that because we're not talking about Javier Báez. I don't know if he's starting or if Trey Sweeney is starting or what that looks like. And that's a whole different conversation. And then there's the element of Wenzel Perez. Are we still counting on him? Do we think he can be a piece? It's a very intriguing bench bat with the switch hit component. And if he can play some infield too, I think he maybe takes over that spot from Zach McKinstry, considering the fact that he would have the switch hit ability. But again, just the infield defense is such a question mark for Perez. So I don't know. I think there's a lot to dive in, and we have a lot of time before we get to 2025 opening day to break down the bench. But I do think it's an interesting conversation, and I do think Matt Vierling as a bench piece looks really, really good on a team that has improvements throughout its lineup via free agency or trade. But you got to make the improvements in free agency or trade if you're going to have Matt Vierling as a really good bench bat. If you don't make those improvements, he might need to start a lot of games again.
Of course. My podcast partner came up with 6 different reasons why even a good bench might not be the bench because he is just damn insightful, that boy. There are reasons why Evan Petzold is the beat writer. All right, let's get to question 1 of the big 2. The Tigers have an opportunity to finish, at 500 finally, or get to 500 for the season if they win Monday's game. Do we think they will finish above 500 in 2024?
So let's look at the AL Central standings really quick just to update people on where things are at with the Tigers. Because when we start talking 500, sometimes it's easy to start thinking playoffs. when you consider where the AL Central was last year, it is not the same AL Central that it was last year, which has surprised a lot of people. The Cleveland Guardians at 75-55, the Minnesota Twins at 72-58, the Kansas City Royals at 72-58 as well, and then the Detroit Tigers at 65-66. A win on Monday against the lowly White Sox would move them to a 500 record for the first time since early in June. The Tigers are 10.5 games back in the AL Central. They're also 7.5 games back for the final AL wild card. But now they have a 2.3% chance to make the playoffs. Exactly 2 weeks ago, the Tigers had a 0.2% chance to make the playoffs. That's where the Tigers are at in the AL Central. If we were talking last year's AL Central, a 500 record would be pretty interesting considering where the division was at. This year, you got 3 teams at the top who have really run away with it, and the Tigers have been straggling behind for a very, very long time. Their playoff odds are all but gone, but we can't knock how they've been playing as of late. Fangraphs predicts the Tigers to finish 80-82. I think we need to look at the strength of schedule because, again, when there are teams out there like the White Sox that you're playing, you're going to win more of those games because the Tigers are a better team than the White Sox, hands down, no question about it. So I think strength of schedule is at least somewhat important to look at. The combined winning percentage for remaining opponents is .466 with 31 games remaining. That's the third easiest remaining schedule. The toughest teams, 6 games against the Orioles, 3 games against the Padres, 3 games against the Royals, 3 games against the Red Sox, and 3 games against the Rays. The easiest teams, you got 4 games against the White Sox remaining. You got 3 games against the Rockies, 3 games against the Angels, and 3 games against the Oakland Athletics. Now, we have to remember the Tigers are playing the White Sox right now. 5 runs on 10 hits Friday, 13 runs on 14 hits Saturday, 9 runs on 14 hits Sunday. After Thursday's loss to the Cubs, though, the Tigers had a 62-66 record, which was on pace for 78 wins and 84 losses. What was the Tigers' record last season? That's right. It was exactly that. 78 wins and 84 losses. So I don't think we should get too distracted based on the 3 games against the White Sox. This team still has a long ways to go. The Tigers used to be the bad team, and the schedule is a schedule. You get to play all the games, even if the games are against bad teams. The Tigers have more games against bad teams than they do against good teams down the stretch. That's why I think they will finish above 500. But I still think it's too soon to call this a good team. Like, they have a long ways to go. They got to put the pieces together. There's young guys that are on this roster now. It is a roster filled with young players, one of the youngest teams in all of baseball. And there's still a lot to figure out with this group. Things are trending in the right direction. I love the idea of finishing above 500. I think it's a huge win for this team and this organization moving forward. But I think they're going to get there because, the strength of schedule, it's not that strong going down the stretch.
All right, so 31 games left, including tomorrow. If you're asking me, can they win 18 games? Yeah, I think they could win 18 games. The real interesting question becomes, can they win 21 games? Because if they win 21 games, they win 86 games. And if they win 86 games, it forces all 3, it forces for sure Kansas City and Minnesota, who are both very good, by the way. It forces them to win 14 games. So they have to play close to 500 to guarantee themselves a playoff spot. It'd be a lot of fun if the Tigers could win 21 games, wouldn't it? You never know about baseball. I'd say the odds of that happening are pretty slim, but not impossible.
Would you put it at 2.3%? Because Fangraphs has it at 2.3% to make the playoffs for the Tigers. So would you put it at 2.3, or you think it's more than that or less than that? The Tigers go on a crazy run like that.
I think it's 3 times higher than that. I think it's 6.9%. No, do I think that if they played it 97 times, that they would only do it 3 times, win 21 games? I think there's a difference between the playoffs and winning 86 games. I think the odds are probably better to win 86 than they are to be in the playoffs. That let's separate those two things. But at the same time, you know what I've said all year. It's never who you're playing. It's always how you're playing.
Unless you're playing the White Sox.
Unless you're playing the White Sox, which I think they would struggle to be 500 in the minor leagues in AAA. We're going to probably have to remind everybody how bad the White Sox are another 30 times today, because find it almost an impossibility that they will not lose over 120 games. And this is one of the worst baseball teams in the last 100 plus years. That's how terrible they are. All right, let's go to question 2 of the big 2. How are the new kids performing after more than a week of games? How are the old kids performing? And how about the injury mix? What's up?
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of good things. This is a fun lineup when you look up and down what the Tigers are able to roll out. And to start with the new kids, Dillon Dingler, Jace Jung, and Trey Sweeney. Let's dig into what those guys have been able to do. Dillon Dingler at catcher looks a little bit lost at the plate right now, but again, he's been okay on defense behind the plate. He's going to continue to improve. Based on the eye test, I think with more experience, he's going to be a solid catcher behind the plate. We've heard great things about him in the minor leagues. Pitchers in the minors, they raved about his game calling and his ability just to manage the game. He can shut down the running game with his arm. He hasn't done that quite yet to this point in his big league career, but he's learning. He's literally learning how to call games in the big leagues, and he is learning how to work with veteran pitchers like Kenta Maeda and, AAA Toledo friends like Brant Herter and Ty Madden, who's going to make his MLB debut Monday against the White Sox. Like, he's caught those guys before, but for a guy like Kenta Maeda, he has never caught him before in his life. And so he's learning how to not only work with the guys that he's been with in Toledo, but also, some new faces here in the big leagues. So I think Dillon Dingler is going to be rock solid behind the plate. I think he's going to be better than Jake Rogers at the plate as a hitter. So far, he's hitting 170 with 1 home run, 2 walks, and 17 strikeouts in 13 games. Jace Jung playing third base. So far, he is hitting 226 with 5 walks and 13 strikeouts in 9 games. Great plate discipline, but a lot of swing and miss in his game, and he's not hitting the ball very hard. But it's super early. Need to give him way more time before we evaluate offense. But based on what we learned from the minor leagues, I'm not the biggest fan of his bat, but I do love his approach and his plate discipline. The defense is bad. We've already seen it. He's already worth -2 defensive runs saved, and it's been 68 innings. He's really slow, so he's not going to steal any bases. He's not going to be great moving back and forth. It's kind of been a mess at third base so far. The arm he just looks uncomfortable at third base. It's probably the best way to put it. I think he needs to play second base. We've known that. We've talked about it. There's nothing new there. Trey Sweeney, shortstop, hitting 211 with 1 home run, 0 walks, and 4 strikeouts in 6 games. Really impressive exit velocities, getting the barrel on the ball. He's chasing way too much, swinging and missing too much, and striking out too much without any walks. That's a problem. That's concerning to me from an offensive profile. But when he makes contact, he hits it hard. He just needs to get the ball off the ground. Pretty much all of his balls in play have been on the ground except for his home run. So for Trey Sweeney, it's get the ball in the air, stop swinging at bad pitches, make more contact. If those things happen, well, good things are going to come with the offensive performance. I will say I love what I'm seeing on the defensive side of the ball from Trey Sweeney. He is already worth +2 defensive runs saved at shortstop in just 36 innings. I love the respect. I love that he's getting the respect that he deserves from the defensive runs saved metric. He looks super smooth at shortstop. Okay. I don't know if he's ever going to make Javier Báez flashy plays, but he's going to make all the routine plays. He's going to make the difficult plays, and he's going to get the job done day in and day out. And I think that's what really impresses me about Trey Sweeney is never going to go over the top. But again, he's never doing too much. The game seems slow to him. And I think that's impressive. The game has slowed down for him already as a shortstop. Now, will it slow down for him at the plate? Will he ever be able to hit enough to actually be a real factor? I'm not so sure. But defensively speaking, he looks super comfortable at shortstop. And that's a really good sign for the Tigers moving forward because we know they need shortstop. So I like what I'm seeing so far from the young guys when it comes to Dingler, to Jace Jung, and Trey Sweeney. There are holes in all of their games, but it's still early and they're just getting their feet wet.
Yeah, look, it's hard to judge guys in 2 weeks. I think just any baseball person watching Jace Jung play third base pretty much knows now, unless somebody waves 3 wishes in front of him, he's not a third baseman. Just like Spencer Torkelson wasn't a third baseman. Spencer Torkelson's barely a first baseman, for heaven's sakes. But yeah, they need to confront the truth about that one. And in the famous words of my father, don't tell yourself a story. And I hope they don't tell themselves a story and decide they're not going to go buy themselves a legitimate third baseman and be an interesting team next year because they have Jace Jung. That would be a travesty. Trey Sweeney looks passable. I mean, love the swing against the left-hander today. That was a sweet swing up there today, wasn't it, man? That was
it was good to see. I mean, that was a cutter that was right over the middle of the plate, and it's a left on left. And Trey Sweeney has not been great historically, going back to the minor leagues as a left-handed hitter against left-handed pitchers. But in a situation like that, he got a cookie right over the middle of the plate, and he did a good job of just redirecting it. He did his job in that situation. That was a good sign. I think if he can have enough plate discipline against lefties and then hit the mistakes, he could be passable as an everyday guy, but we still need to see way more with the bat with him, I think.
He torched that, and that's what major leaguers do, regardless of handedness. They torch mistakes. Dillon Dingler excites me. He's a little lost sometimes against spin. There was one at bat today. I was just shaking my head. I was kind of laughing. It was like you wanted to call him a rookie. First pitch was spin, hit the heck out of it to right, ball curves foul. Second one had a pretty decent swing, almost exactly the same pitch. Third pitch seemed totally confounded by spin. It was the third pitch in a row that was spin. He barely even made a pass at it. It was in the strike zone. Strike three, went back to the dugout. I didn't quite understand that at bat. I was kind of chuckling. But Dillon Dingler hits the ball hard. You know, he hits the ball hard, and I like his defense a lot. You know, I mean, he never thought twice about him. Occasionally, ball's gone off his glove as a throwing arm. Holy smokes, dude.
He's got a cannon. He's got a cannon.
Ryan.
And Mark, the thing too is like we have these young guys, and it's Dingler and it's Jace Jung and it's Trey Sweeney, but you mentioned the injured guys coming back and how they all blend together, right? Like Kerry Carpenter, you got a lot of swing and miss in the bat right now, especially coming back from the lower back injury that kept him out for 2 months. He's got a lot of strikeouts right now, but at the same time, that's a middle of the order bat. That's a real dude who's going to produce, over a season's, worth of games. Just got to keep him healthy. Riley Greene, he was an all-star for a reason. It's great having him back in this lineup. It really makes things so much different when Riley Greene is in there. He was an all-star for a reason, middle of the order bat. Parker Meadows is like the biggest difference maker, the biggest X factor for me, hitting .351 with 2 home runs, 4 walks, and 14 strikeouts in 19 games since July 5th when he returned from the injured list. It's elite defense in center field. Worked his way into the leadoff spot now against right-handed pitchers. 6 steals and 8 attempts during that 19-game stretch that I was just discussing. All good things from Parker Meadows, back up in the leadoff spot. The Tigers love the way that he's handling his at-bats, both in the plate discipline and choosing the right pitches to swing at. But also, too, when he does swing, because of the swing mechanic change that he made to, avoid that uphill swing that he had earlier in the season, to flatten things out a little bit more so it wasn't as much of an uppercut swing. He's mentally trying to hit down on the ball. That's the way that he thinks about it. And that's caused for a lot more line drives and just more hits in general. He's not striking out as much. He's not popping out as much. We're seeing more hard contact and more quality of contact from Parker Meadows. He's an X factor for me. It's great to see him back. Matt Vierling, we talked about him already, what he's done. He's not a returner from an injury or a guy who came back from AAA, but he's been solid in the lineup. Spencer Torkelson, he went 4 for 4 in the first game in Chicago against the Cubs. Since then, he is 3 for 21 with 2 walks and 7 strikeouts in his last 5 games. He has struck out 2 times in each of the past 3 games, all against the White Sox. Can we give Colt Keith the first baseman glove, please? I would love to see that happen because it's about time to move on from Spencer Torkelson. It's a lot of fun when he's going good, but it's a couple games of going good, and then it's back to the old version of Spencer Torkelson. That's really frustrating, not only for Tigers fans, but also for the Tigers. So hopefully he's able to turn it around, but I'm just not so sure about it. But still, it's a lot of young players, mentioning all those names and kind of going through the list, starting with Dillon Dingler, Jace Jung, Trey Sweeney. You get into Carpenter and Riley Greene and Parker Meadows and even Spencer Torkelson and obviously Colt Keith. And Colt Keith, by the way, hitting .305 with 8 homers, 14 walks, and 34 strikeouts in 44 games since July 3rd. Not a big fan of the defense at second base, but the guy hits, and he's going to hit, and he's going to keep hitting. So a lot of young guys in this lineup. There's potential here. It feels good. It's enjoyable to watch. It's a lot of fun.
All right. So before we move on to our guest, I'll give you a couple of fast data points, not including today's game. Since July 5th, because I always like to think the Tigers are a different team because that was the day they originally called up Parker Meadows. Before today, Parker was 351, 385, 581, 171 WRC plus. Add the defense in, you know what you get out of 19 games of Parker Meadows, including the injury. You get 1.1 WAR, and that's holy smokes. Okay. Colt Keith before today, 297, 355, 481 since the 5th of July. 137 WRC plus, didn't even include the fun of today. And his defense has been so improved in the last 6 weeks, shockingly, that he was a positive defender, and he was worth in 42 games, 1.4 WAR. Third on that list is Matt Vierling at 283, 342, 455, and a 1.1 WAR. And Zach McKinstry at 248, 303, 415, a 102 WRC plus, and 0.8 WAR in 33 games. Holy smokes, 0.8 WAR for Zach McKinstry in 33 games. All right, people are doing well, and they deserve to be discussed. And just like when we ride them when they're playing poorly, at least we could do, to be fair, is discuss them when they do well, right? All right, so we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk to one of our favorite guests, Nick Pollack, the founder of PitcherList, and we're going to get into all kinds of fun data about Tiger pitchers, about pitchers in general, especially starting pitchers. We'll be back with Nick Pollack in 60.
All right, I'd like to welcome Nick Pollack, the founder of PitcherList, to the Days of Roar podcast for the second time. Nick is one of the best in the business at evaluating pitchers, especially starting pitchers. He is joining us primarily to break down the Cy Young caliber season of Tarik Skubal, but also to discuss other pitching topics pertaining to the Tigers. Nick, thanks for coming back on the pod. It's an honor to have you again.
Oh, stop. It's so good to be here. Thank you so much for welcoming me back. And I got to say, Mark, we've had so many DMs. It's about time I came back a second time.
Yeah, we're so glad you're here, man. And also, let's remind everybody, you have your own podcast with Inosaurus called The Craft. It's all about pitching. It's a great podcast, so I hope everyone will listen to that too.
Oh, thanks a lot. Yeah, I can't believe I got to do a podcast with Inosaurus. That guy's a legend.
All right, so let's start here. What are the odds Tarik Skubal wins the American League Cy Young Award? And can you help put the greatness of his 2024 season into perspective? There are some names out there like Cole Reagans and Seth Lugo and Logan Gilbert, Framber Valdez, George Kirby, Tanner Houck, Corbin Burns, of course, is the name that everybody talks about. But Tarik Skubal, like by and far, is the front runner to win the American League Cy Young. What are the chances it happens? And then what do you think about his 2024?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty easy to say that he's going to win at this point. It's kind of rare to see a pitcher who has both sides of the Cy Young argument kind of on his, in his favor. Of you have the old school, he's got to get wins. And of course, he has the most wins in the American League, 15-4 record. Then you say, well, he's got to go long. Well, yeah, 97th percentile in innings at 160 so far. He has all the ratios that you would want. Anything you want to say about FIP? Yeah, he has that at 258, even though I'm not even a stand for FIP and advanced metrics for the Cy Young, because I don't know about your takes. I'm very much about, is he doing the two things that matter? Is he pitching a lot in games? And is he preventing runs? And for the guy that comes up with all the advanced metrics to understand how good a player is, when it comes to a performance award, I don't care about all the other things. Your only job description is to stop runs from scoring across how many innings as possible. And Tarik Skubal does that stupid well. I mean, it's pretty obvious, and it's really just an amazing story of a guy coming back from Tommy John, being a different arm last year, and then sustaining it, if not even more so, throughout the next year. It's awesome to see him do it, and yeah, he should be getting that Cy Young.
So Skubal throws fastball, changeup, sinker, slider, and knuckle curve. All of his stuff is nasty, but can you kind of explain how he's been mixing, how he's been sequencing his pitches to get the most out of this elite arsenal this season?
Yeah, it's wild. Tarik Skubal, to me, last year when I think we talked about in the offseason, I said, look, he came back and he did two things really well. He threw super hard instead of 94 and hoping it to hit 95, sitting essentially 97 last year. And guess what? He's held that right at 97 again with his four-seamer. But it was really the changeup when he showed up that all of a sudden was this brand new pitch and missing so many bats. And guess what? This year against right-handers, which I want everyone to understand, if you are a lefty, even though we talk about this being a slider league, that is, if you don't have a good slider, you can't be good. Well, really, in truth, If you are a right-handed pitcher, you need to have a slider. Why? Because you mostly face right-handed batters and you want to throw pitches that go away from hitters. So if you're a lefty, it's actually a changeup league. Look at the other lefties who are successful. You have Cole Reagan's with an elite changeup as well. Tyler Anderson's having a great year with an elite changeup. That's how you do it. And Tarik Skubal, 28% swinging strike rate on his changeup this year against right-handed batters. Unreal. We get excited if we see like 17% swinging strike rate. That means over a quarter of the time he throws a changeup to a right-hander, they are swinging and missing. It's unheard of. He throws it at an elite strike rate too. So he just throws this and it's like, hey, you can't do anything with it. And that's that. And what's nuts too is it's a four-seamer that doesn't really get the elite whiffs you would think with 97 miles per hour. Like it's 12% swing strike rate. Like the best ones in the game are 15, 16. Some are even like 18, and that's ridiculous. Brian Wu. But this isn't that kind of four-seamer. It's one that works so well with the changeup against the right-handers. But when you go to left-handers, he actually does the thing you're supposed to do, which is sinkers. You're supposed to go inside to same-handed batters with sinkers, and he does it better than anyone I've seen against left-handers. I have a lot of metrics, and I know it can be very confusing, but all they're trying to say is how good is this pitch actually? And one that you might have seen a lot is barrel rate or hard hit rate, pretty much saying when batters, they hit the ball hard, that's good. We know that. Well, we have something called ICR, which is saying, well, it's not just barrels. Like they have the other things that are designated by Savant as solid or sweet spot or hitting it on the ground really hard. That's called a burner. And we actually compact all of them together. So instead of just saying hard hit rate, we do ICR rate, which is ideal contact rate. And when you throw a pitch, if you throw a fastball, 40% is like the threshold. You want to be underneath 40% to be like, oh, hey, cool, this is not so bad. For lefties dealing with Tarik Skubal's sinker, the pitch he throws 55% against them, he has a 15% ICR allowed, which is ridiculous. You do not see that, especially when a pitch he throws over half the time to lefties. They cannot do any damage against this pitch. And I mean, that's really all I need to say. He doesn't even need to have the slider being elite. It's only a 17% swing strike rate against lefties. It's usually a lot better than that against lefties on lefties, and his is fine. That's all it needs to be because those two pitches just mess them up. And when he does throw the changeup, yeah, it's only a 32% swing strike rate against lefties because they don't expect it. Like, it's dumb. Tarik Skubal is not only having all of the skills and doing and executing them, he's doing it for a full season. You know, we see more bumps in the road, and he's just not doing that. He hasn't slowed down with the velocity. I mean, it's great. Enjoy it, guys. Like, and you have Jason Benetti calling it. Oh my gosh, it's a dream.
Nobody breaks it down better than Nick Pollack, founder of PitcherList. Nobody calls it better than Jason Benetti, play-by-play voice of the Detroit Tigers. Nick, you mentioned the changeup, and that tease things up for the next question. I'm really curious about is Skubal throws a seam-shifted wake changeup. Remember, he had the changeup in 2020. The splitter in 2021, he went back to the changeup in 2022. Then he had the injury. Then over the past two seasons, coming back from the injury, it's been the seam-shifted wake changeup. In the simplest way possible, can you explain what exactly is a seam-shifted wake changeup? How is it different than like a normal changeup? And why does that specific pitch work so well for Skubal?
Yeah, so seam shifted wake, it sounds like a mathematical term, some scientific whatever jargon to confuse you. And essentially all it's saying is that instead of just the natural spin that the air drag as the ball goes through the air on the seams makes the ball move differently. And instead of just actually the revolutions of the ball and how we're spinning it, we're actually making the ball stay in a certain orientation. So that as the air goes against the ball, as it goes through the air, it's pushing it a certain direction. So when it comes to a changeup, and I have a ball in my hand, if you're throwing a typical circle change, you can do it two ways. One, you could throw it as if you're throwing a four-seamer, and that's just a four-seam circle change. And that essentially means you're going to stay on top of the ball the entire time, and that the seams are going to continue to move in the same direction. And you won't really get seam-shifted wake with it, because to get seam-shifted wake, you actually need the top of the baseball to not change where the seam orientation is. So it needs to be more sideways. And that would mean that the top of the seam doesn't actually move away from that spot, which means it's consistent air drag against the air as it goes through. So what Skubal does is he then throws it more like a two-seamer, gets on the side of the ball. And as he does that, he's essentially having the horseshoe on top of the baseball. And then as it spins, that seam is staying there. So that allows it to get the extra drop. And all of a sudden, there you go. You have a 30% overall swing strike rate on a changeup.
You know, one of the other things that's so quite amazing about Skubal's changeup is the ability that he has now mastered to repeat it. The level of consistency in the quality of how he throws it almost every single pitch. He makes so very few mistakes, and almost all of them are either where he wants them to go or very good. There's no floaters in the middle of the plate that, I mean, yeah, everybody once in a while, but it's just always such a weapon for him almost every time he throws it now. That's what makes it great.
Yeah, I would even push back and say, yes, he does make those, but his stuff is good enough in the way that he mixes them together. It's so hard to tell if that is the changeup or the sinker or the four-seamer. And that allows him to get away with it. We have a stat on our site called mistake rate, which is something that I think everybody watching baseball would be like, oh yeah, of course, duh. But it was really hard for us to quantify for a while, which essentially says when a pitch is over the plate, what are the pitches that have double the chance of allowing a hit, right? Those true meatballs, those ones that when you throw it out of your hand, I remember I used to do this. I would throw it in my hand and I would make like a scream of like, please don't hit it, because I know it was so bad in going down the middle of the plate. And we have that stat. It's normally 7% or so. And for the four-seamer of 7, it's actually about like 5 and change. He throws fewer mistake pitches on that four-seamer. So the changeup is actually a little bit more average in that way. However, I think part of it with our quantification of it, it's more independent of everything else that he throws. And that's a really good showcase of saying, look, he's putting in those places that we think would be a mistake, yet these guys aren't hitting it. They aren't doing damage off of it because it looks just like the sinker, because he's throwing 97 with that fastball as well. And then off of that, it's really tough. I mean, we're talking over 10 miles per hour difference with Tarik Skubal's changeup versus his four-seamer. It's really good. And the fact that he throws so many strikes with it, it's a 73% strike rate. We want a secondary pitch at like 60%. This is 99th percentile among all starting pitchers in the majors for a changeup strike rate. It's incessant. He has the highest CSW on his changeup in the majors. No one has a higher one at 41%. That is called strikes plus whiffs. Unreal. And yeah, it's really just the fact that he throws it 26% of the time. We see other guys with great pitches like this, they throw it 40% of the time. They lean to it so much that they can't get away with those mistakes. And he picks his spots so well. It's so effective. It's always in his back pocket. Yeah, just sit down and watch more Tarik Skubal, guys. He's so good.
All right, so let's jump into somebody that is hard to miss, especially the last month, considering the Tigers have really, on an official basis, only been using 2 starters. So let's talk about Keider Montero. Had a pretty excellent month, 3-1, 353. I think he's thrown 30 innings. What can you tell us? Is he starting to show up on your radar? And what are your thoughts about what he's bringing to the table?
He's fine. I'm sorry to not be more encouraged about Montero. I would really be surprised if he's in the rotation for the Tigers next year. There are too many options coming for next year, I think, with the Tigers. He had a great start against Mariners with 8 strikeouts. He hasn't had a game above 5 strikeouts outside of that. And if you're unaware, T-Mobile Park in Seattle has essentially induces 25% more strikeouts than the average park, which is a very strange thing. And I still haven't quite got a good answer as to why. The best answer I have is the batter's eye is kind of confusing. But so I see that 8 strikeout mark against the Mariners, and not to mention, of course, that's a terrible lineup. But even take that lineup in other parks, it gets normalized for that. There isn't a lot to really latch onto with Montero. What I've really seen for the most part, it's fastball, slider. They're both fine. And there are times when his command is good enough, and then times when his command is just kind of there. I wanted to come in here and be like, oh man, these are excellent skills that I'm really into with Keider Montero. But as I've been covering him since he got the comfortable spot in the rotation, there really hasn't been a lot for me to say, like, yeah, this is the Montero that I think is going to be there and be consistent. He does a thing at times called dancing with the disco, which is like Anthony Descafani, of throwing a lot of sliders over the plate for strikes. There are some games I've seen that where his fastball isn't quite there. He's like, all right, I'm just going to go to my slider and hopefully this works. It has at times. But yeah, I think that come this time next year, you won't see Montero in the rotation.
Another name, Brant Herter, in the bullpen, but was a starter in AAA Toledo. I don't know how much you've watched of him because, again, he's getting these bulk, outings as opposed to traditional starts. He will be starting on Tuesday, though, against the Los Angeles Angels, so that'll be good to see him getting opportunities there in the first inning as opposed to coming out of the bullpen. But Brant Herter, left-hander, does he have any real path to being in the starting rotation long-term, or do you think he's more of a reliever type moving forward?
So I just want to ask here, do you mean Brent Herter or Brian Sammons? Because honestly, they're the same person to me.
Let's talk about them both. What do you got?
I mean, it's kind of funny, right? Like they're both lefty guys who throw fastballs that are not impressive. It's about 91, 92 for Sammons. It's 92, 93 sinkers from Herter. What's really crazy is his strike rate is 81% right now on that sinker, which you never see 80%. That is not sticking around, and he's allowed only 25% ICR, as I've mentioned before on it. He has located well, and I'm going to give you something really, really lovely here. Against lefties, it's a very small sample. This is 48 pitches. We have our own quantifier. It's PLV. It's over 6, and the only time I've ever seen a pitch be over 6 for a season was Jacob deGrom's slider. So it's so far been really good against lefties and deserved the success he's had. I don't think that's going to stick in the slightest. Overall, against righties, it is not nearly as good. It's a 4.9, which is below average, with 5 being average. And it's a sweeper, cool. But to be a successful starter in the majors, especially as a lefty, if we're talking about this, you have to have a changeup. It can't be a sweeper. Sweeper is not good against opposite-handed batters. He goes into them. It's a lot easier to hit. It's a lot easier to tell that it's coming, and then they can wrap the bat around it very effectively. And that changeup isn't doing much against right-handers so far. And it's really hard to sell Brant Herter saying he's a sinker baller with a sweeper and a developing changeup that's not quite there yet. That does not speak to a sustainable starter, in my view. And then with Brian Sammons, at least he has a nullifying pitch in the cutter. For right-handers, I'm a huge fan of opposite-handed batters seeing cutters. It's essentially like the sinker. You want to be going into the bat off the plate and inducing contact that way. Unfortunately, it's a terrible ICR, 57% so far, which is horrific on that cutter. He's a guy that executes some of them and then doesn't execute on the next one. The four-seamer is... it's just there's not a lot for me to really latch onto for either of these guys. They've been doing enough thus far, and they've also faced some weak lineups, not including the Yankees for a moment there. But yeah, Herter and Sammons are kind of like Montero as stopgaps, sadly.
And they've also faced those lineups one time or two times through the order as relievers. There's a reason why the Tigers didn't insert them immediately into the starting rotation. So we're out on Keider Montero. We're out on Brant Herter. We're out on Brian Sammons. Can we show some love to Reese Olson? He's coming back from injury. But man, what did he do in 2024 to repeat his success of 2023? And maybe even take it to the next level. And then again, Nick, like with Reese Olson, what is the next step for him to get even better? Can he ever enter that Cy Young caliber conversation? Because it seems like he has a secondary step to do it. Where is he at in your mind? And what's the next step for him to truly become elite?
Yeah, it's going to feel like the 1990s, actually, next year, hopefully, because you'll all be about the Olsen wins. And if you're a Full House fan, you'll get that one. So his slider and changeup are great. Reese Olson, I'm a huge fan of those two pitches. And there were times this year when he went on that really nice run, I believe it was in either May or June early this year, before he got hurt. Those two pitches were working in tandem really well. The biggest concern I have is the four-seamer is bad. It is not a good four-seamer. It is not a pitch that I would be trusting. And Mark, I think you'd agree that if you don't have a fastball that you really trust in the zone, that you're just trying to sneak by, you're not going to have a ton of long-term success. Now with Reese, what he was doing really effectively was he was commanding that sinker well, leading with the slider, leading with the changeup at times too. That can certainly work, but if we're going to take Reese Olson to the next level of being not just a great SP4-5, saying he's going to be an SP2-3 for the Tigers, he needs to do something with his four-seamer sinker. I don't believe he's going to fix that four-seamer, which means you have to then lean into cut action on it. You need to be able to say, look, sinkers are for right-handers. Against left-handers, I can't go sinker. I don't trust the four-seamer. I need to get more cut on this so that I can go inside properly against lefties. That to me is, I guess, the last piece that I'd be looking for. But hey, maybe it's just velocity. Just throw harder. That'd be cool. That'd be great. But the shape of his four-seamer is something I've really been focusing on, really just for every pitcher, four-seamer shape, on making sure I understand that fully of, look, is this a 97 that gets hit all the time? Because we see that all the time. Somehow Nathan Eovaldi got hit at like 98. Why? Because it was bad attack angle, which meant that the path of the ball matched the path of the bat and more intersection points to make contact. Or they don't get extension. They don't get really far out like Matt Manning does, which means that 98 actually kind of looks like 95, 96, which is a little bit more palatable. Things like that. And of course, not having the vertical break up. It's just falling back into a late bat, which is a bad thing too. So Reese Olson has to fix those. I don't think he's going to do that if he's going to keep his slider and changeup, which means instead of trying to play that game of the four-seamer, getting that vert and trying to get the effective one upstairs that you see a lot, he's got to shift it to more of the movement profile of hanging along the edges and trying to get movement and location as opposed to overpowering them with it. So hopefully he can do that. I'm not holding my breath. I do expect a good season, though, for Reese Olson as he gets more time getting comfortable with the slider and changeup.
Yeah, Reese Olson, I think the biggest difference in 2024 Reese Olson, mid-August to end of 2023 Reese Olson and anything else is he just doesn't make terrible mistakes with his fastball on the plate. So I'm not saying his fastball is super effective, but he does not put it in places that are going to get him in deep, deep trouble. And he's really hard to hit when he's throwing sliders and changeups, 60% of the time. So an SP3, that's a pretty good SP3 if Reese Olson's your SP3. All right, let's dovetail into two guys that have now sort of become kind of enigmas. One really an enigma to me, doesn't seem quite nearly as terrible as it feels like he is. The other one, I just think that he just doesn't have the aptitude to be good. And I'm curious if you think he should be converted to be a reliever. So let's jump into the Casey Mize, Matt Manning discussion and tell me what you saw earlier. Casey is not thrown in almost 60 days and Matt Manning is probably not going to be seen again this year. And frankly was just terrible this year. So tell me, give us some thoughts.
Oh, man, Mark, I remember talking to you over the offseason. We're like, okay, you compared Manning to Wheeler. And first I was like, what? That's ridiculous. And then I started to buy it because I'm getting into fastball shape. And what is it for Matt Manning's last year? Well, he's an extension guy. He has 7 feet of extension. That's a big thing with Wheeler. That's excellent. And he was also flirting at times with 95. The vert on the pitch is fine. It's 15 inches, at least it was last year. And the attack angle, really good, flat. So if you're telling me you get a lot of extension and you have a flat attack angle and you're sitting 95 plus, that is the Wheeler way. Also, you have a slider that you were comfortable throwing strikes back, Manning, and also felt, okay, I can understand this. The problem is that he didn't grow. Is that the things that we got excited about, that even in the spring, we were seeing 95 plus, we were seeing more vert this year, being closer to 17 inches of induced vertical break with that velocity, with that flat angle. Oh my gosh, I was so excited. I couldn't believe it. And then what happens? He doesn't make the rotation out of camp. And I couldn't believe it. I know he was allowing.
I was just as shocked too. I was just as shocked.
That's a situation that drives me up the wall because I think teams at times think, well, he just didn't have this one small sample that was good enough and he allowed a few extra home runs or something like that. Instead of saying, okay, wait, hold on. You're executing four seamers upstairs really well and it's the best it's ever looked. And your slider's still really good and this should work. And instead, now you send him into a whole loop of trying to get back into it, trying to do too much, not being... No one wants to go back to the minors after establishing yourself in the majors for as long as Matt Manning did. And I think that just completely messed him up. He hasn't gotten the velocity back. We haven't seen him sharp when he's been up here. It's been rough for him. And I'm excited for him to get the reset button when it comes to next year. I mean, you guys know better than I do, but I'm just trying to rock through it right now. Tarik Skubal, Flaherty's gone, unfortunately. I mean, good job with Flaherty, by the way, guys. I'm really proud of you. But whatever you did, you got him to get sliders down beautifully. It was at peak Flaherty and has been since Thank you for that game against the Cardinals. I don't know what it was.
Hey, that wasn't us. That was all Scott Harris, president of baseball operations. You got to give him the credit there.
On behalf of him, thank you guys. So, no, representing him. And so Flaherty's gone. Right. So then you have Olsen. You have, Sawyer Gibson-Long's out until the midsummer or so, right? TGS, I believe. So that's unfortunate. But you got to see Manning fighting again in the rotation. You should probably see Casey Mize. And with Mize was very similar to Manning of fastball was looking even better. And I was really hoping that the slider would be the thing. When I first saw Casey Mize show up in the majors, I was like, I don't really like the sinker much. In the splitter, okay, there's a couple. That's what everyone talked about. But like, what is this cutter slider? It was beautiful. It was the golden pitch for him. He could execute it at any moment. He used it as a whiff. He used it to get called strikes perfectly. It was everything. And then when he came back and he was starting this year, no, that slider was just not good. He needed something else. And the four-seamer wasn't enough. Batters were just sitting on the four-seamer and they didn't really care about anything else. He didn't have a splitter and nullified either. And that's that. So I see Mize and I go, all right, just find your slider. Like that could happen. He could all of a sudden show up with a brand new slider. And that's it.
That's exactly what the Tigers sent him to AAA Toledo to do. He went down there on an extended rehab assignment, 4 starts. And the entire objective was find your slider.
Right.
Figure out the slider, come back up. And if you can come with a better slider, you're going to have better results. Speaking of another pitcher, we talked about him in the offseason. Kenta Maeda signed a 2-year, $24 million deal, $14 million in 2024, $10 million in 2025. Is there any hope for a better version of Kenta Maeda in 2025?
It's hard to expect it. The fastball is not getting better. We've seen some moments in this relief stretch. He had about 6 games of relief. The first 4 where he was properly opened for were better with his slider. And then he saw this game against the Cubs and that wasn't good. And it's really hard to buy into Kenta Maeda getting you so many quality innings with the slider and the splitter that are not elite anymore because the fastballs certainly are not doing it. So I think you're going to be in a situation that Maeda is going to be out of the pen in 2025.
So Maeda in the pen, and you were rattling off the names of some guys who could be in the starting rotation in 2025. Should Jackson Jobe, top pitching prospect in all of baseball, just make the 2025 opening day roster based on talent alone?
Yes.
He's walking some guys recently, but like, is it Jackson Jobe time? Can you keep? Yes. We said yes too. Last week we talked about this. We said yes. Can you add to that and kind of, do the slam dunk thing?
Yeah. So what really bothers me, I wish I could slam dunk harder and I can't, but I don't have the data that I need for Jackson Jobe because he hasn't pitched in AAA yet. And the Tigers have been very adamant to say we are not going to get him to the majors until he pitches in AAA, which is annoying. And it also tells me, okay, he's not up next week. Fine. But Jackson Jobe he is better than Paul Skeens. That was my assessment of him, watching him, because Paul Skeens has 3 pitches. He has a similar velocity fastball that just is a better shape to it. Yeah, Jackson Jobe is so legit, and I'm just so excited for the Tigers to give some excuse that he doesn't start out of camp, that he needs to be held back for another service time year or something stupid like that. He's probably going to start like April 15th or something, give that extra 2 weeks. And I really, really hate that because Jobe should be here in September. I am a major believer that you give a guy a taste before the offseason, show him what it's like to be in the bigs. That is in their mind so much more than the entire offseason, spring training. Having a taste of that to understand what to prep for is massive, and showcase that they can have success in it. And I know, give Jobe, just don't put Jobe against like the Yankees. Put Jobe against like, I don't know, your White Sox or even your Twins. Fine. Okay. Just give him something that's like not the worst and he'll soar. He'll be great. Get that out of the way. So then when he shows up in the spring, he's just confident as anything. He is very legit. You're going to be loving Skubal and Jobe next year, 1-2. It's going to be great. And all you can really hope for is a Colt. Then you got Reese Olson at 3. Mize and Manning, at least one of those hit. And you should be good for 4. And then you'll figure out the 5. You'll get some starter, some random guy, or maybe Ty Madden works. It won't. I'm sad to say. I have no expectations for this tomorrow. But I wish I did. I do not. But you'll find something else for that 5th.
Nick, all I can say to you about what you said about Jackson Jobe, It's like you listen to the podcast because all we can say is, yes, yes. This is what we've been saying for probably 6 weeks. I mean, let him come up here. Let him figure out what he can't do and what he can do. Let him learn. I just didn't understand how many pitches they have now wasted in Erie. It's the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life.
I have a good friend of mine, Stephen Lyman, who comes on every year to talk about injured players. He works at AHSS in New York, physical therapist and everything, and he knows so much about all of this, and he has a fantastic phrase. Pitching is attrition. It's bullets being wasted. And if a guy is ready, you might know someone on Atlanta named Spencer Schwellenbach, who had like 4 minor league starts. It didn't matter. You just shut down the Phillies with 9 strikeouts. Like, bring them up. And especially in a situation for the Tigers, like, you guys want to compete next year. So what are you doing? Get the growing pains out of the way. Get this guy prepared for it. I hate it. I hate it so much.
I don't think any fan out there is saying that they don't want to compete. So we're all right there with you. I think everybody wants to see the Tigers compete, and Jackson Jobe would help them get there.
Yeah.
The other thing too, Nick, before we let you go, is the Tigers fixed Jack Flaherty. Okay. How impressed are you that the Tigers did that? And then also, you mentioned needing to find a 5th starter. How about finding another version of Jack Flaherty? Who out there in the free agent market could the Tigers go get on a 1-year deal and try to sign in the upcoming offseason, even if it's just for a trade and a flip again? And they want to find a good starter that they can hang their hat on, try to fix. What are you thinking, man? Like, who's out there that might work? And then how impressed are you with the fact that they were able to fix Jack Flaherty?
Well, okay, so first of all, Jack Flaherty able to fix him. I always struggle with this. I want to give the Tigers as much credit as possible. So, like, you guys fixed it. A lot of times it's just going through the motions. Sometimes it's someone in the offseason that they worked with. I think Jack Flaherty looked instantly better in the spring. When we saw him in the spring, we started to like actually get pumped for him. And I don't know how much the Tigers were influencing him before then. If it was something more of a month in, two months in, all of a sudden, like, no, the skills are changing and new, then I'd buy it. I was labeling him a massive CSW darling in all of April, being like, no, we're going to stick with this. We're going to stick with this. And then all of a sudden, he just needed the anger against his former St. Louis crowd with his mom in the audience for him to go nuts. But I mean, I hope that you can find something like that again. I thought that deal was great in general. Just like, what the heck? And you got stuff back at the deadline for this. It was beautiful. When you're looking at free agents for next year, there are different ways that you can go. And I think I want to ask you guys, what kind of bucket of a starter do you want? Are you looking for your guy that can get me innings next year? Like your, I don't know, your Jose Quintana type, your Sean Manaea. Those guys are both going to be free agents, right? Those are decent 5th SP5 guys. Sean Manaea more so than Quintana next year. Are you looking for something that is 1-2 with Tarik Skubal? That would be, are you going to be in on Blake Snell train? Or are you trying to find something in the middle there to maybe take a chance on? Hope that there's going to be something to jump on that then they'd be able to maybe sell at the deadline, something along those lines, because that might be Lucas Giolito, who is going to be free agent and not going to be returning until about July or so. You might be able to get a 2-year deal with him. And then that would mean you'd see an impact with him for probably 2026, which would be a bigger window, I would imagine, than 2025. Give a year for your guys to develop properly. And then if that's not going well, then you'd be able to sell them in 2026. But there aren't too many like mid-tier ones. I mean, Yusei Kikuchi, I am so in. I don't know how aggressive teams are going to be. But when you have big names like Blake Snell on the market and Robbie Ray and Corbin Burns and Max Fried, you might be able to get Kikuchi at somewhat of a discount because everyone else is going to be propped up so much. And they're going to be like, no, I don't want to go to Kikuchi. I want to go after Max Fried. If you jump early and secure something with Yusei, that might actually work really well. Otherwise, you have Walker Buehler. And Buehler, I think the Tigers could fix Buehler. Because I think the Dodgers are doing stupid things. It drives me up the wall. I think the approach of a lot of Dodgers pitchers is weird. I've certainly questioned the Dodgers before, and I know it seems crazy to do that. But seeing Bobby Miller, seeing Walker Buehler, seeing Ryan Pepio being used kind of wrong with their 4-seamers blows my mind. these guys have elite four-seamers that should live upstairs, and these guys actually have been living low a lot with those four-seamers. Ryan Pepio didn't start throwing high until he went to Tampa Bay. That's why they got him in that deal, because they're like low fastball. So see Walker Buehler, and I think, get him to the Tigers. The Tigers understand this. That might be something really fun. I'm curious what will be on the market, but that might be a guy I circle for next year.
I've already mentioned Walker Buehler on previous podcasts. I think it'd be awesome. We'll see if that actually happens. But all right, Nick, that's all we have for you today. We really appreciate your time and your insight into all things pitching. Hopefully we can have you back on the podcast in the offseason. Maybe once the Tigers make a couple of additions in free agency, we can start to project what the rotation looks like. I think that could be a lot of fun.
Oh, I would absolutely love to. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, we're already looking forward to it, man. Thanks again for joining.
Absolutely my pleasure.
Thanks a lot, Nick.
Everyone, that was Nick Pollack, the founder of PitcherList. It's always a treat to have him on the Days of Roar podcast. There's more to discuss about this past week for the Tigers, but first, let's take a break.
All right, that was Nick Pollack from PitcherList. Just a wealth of information and just a guest that both Evan and I love. Just talk so much stuff with him and so much interesting stuff. So thanks a lot, Nick.
He's so good.
He's so good. All right, so let's try to get out of here. We got a few topics to discuss, and we'll call it a night. Ty Madden, he of the 8.50 ERA in Toledo, is going to start tomorrow. I'll find it difficult to believe. He throws more than 35 pitches. He may throw 35 pitches in the first inning. Had a slightly better month of August than the previous 3 months, which would have gotten a normal pitcher released. But he's got an insane whiff rate. He has struck out, I think, 47 hitters in, I don't know how many innings there have, 35 innings. It's something maybe even less than that, but give us the fast down and dirty on Ty Madden and, explain to people exactly the real reason why he's starting them.
Yeah, well, Alex Vieto going down with an injury doesn't help. It would have been great to have him back. He's been used in that opener role. The Tigers are going to rely on Ty Madden, and they're going to give him a go Monday night against the Chicago White Sox here at Guaranteed Rate Field. Yes, he's coming off the best stretch in AAA Toledo with a 5.63 ERA, 5 walks, and 37 strikeouts in 24 innings in 4 starts. Yes, his best stretch in Toledo is a 5.63 ERA. It's been a really rough go for Matt Manning in AAA this season. It's really been a problem. Like, it hasn't been good. It's the guy who has a 6.98 ERA in 22 starts in the minor leagues. That's 4 starts in AA Erie, 18 starts in AAA Toledo. At the AAA level, it's a 7.97 ERA with 40 walks and 102 strikeouts in 79 innings, allowing 17 home runs. So it's a 10.8% walk rate, a 27.6% strikeout rate. The Tigers are calling him up, and it's not really surprising because he is eligible for the Rule 5 draft this offseason. Had he not been called up, the Tigers would have needed to add him to the 40-man roster by mid-November to protect him from being selected by another organization in early December in the Rule 5 draft. So instead of waiting, the Tigers took care of that decision now. At the very least, I think Ty Madden is an interesting arm out of the bullpen because of how nasty the slider is and how many swings and misses the slider gets. The big question for him is he going to be able to really hone in the splitter, which is the off-speed pitch that he has? He's going to need that pitch to help him against left-handers. If he doesn't have that, I'm not so sure that he's going to be able to survive as a starter in the big leagues. In Toledo, his fastball was the only pitch that he consistently located in the strike zone. And even then, he had some struggles, leaking the ball out arm side. But it was his primary pitch in the zone, which led to hard contact because teams they lay off the slider, they lay off the splitter. And when they weren't chasing those pitches out of the zone and they were just hunting in the zone, it was pretty much all fastball. And so it led to a lot of hard contact and a lot of damage in the minor leagues. We'll see if he's able to make adjustments working with Chris Fetter and Robin Lund and Juan Nieves. You'd have to think that those guys are at least going to maybe give him a little bit of maybe a couple of superpowers. I don't know if it's going to supercharge him all the way up and turn him into a Reese Olson caliber pitcher. But yeah, the slider is insane. It's really, really good. The fastball sits around 94. I'm just not so sure that he's going to really be able to put it all together. To me, it's reliever risk. I think he probably ends up as a reliever, but the Tigers are going to give him some runway as a starter. I don't know if he's going to be up here for the rest of the season, but at least in the short term, he'll be making some starts for the Tigers. And we're going to find out really quick if Ty Madden has it or if he doesn't have it.
All right. So I'm going to make this really short. Ty Madden, I have 3 words to say about him, from a future standpoint. Reliever, reliever, reliever. Okay, that's 1. 2, he has been up to 97, 98 many, many times. I think the purpose of tomorrow, and I'm going to speculate he gets 3 or 4 outings, is how hard can you throw in 25 pitch bursts? That's what we need to see. Are you 96 to 99? And then add the slider and maybe get some swing and miss and be a reliever? Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Exactly what they did with Bo Brisky, by the way. So it's time to figure out if that's what he can be. I think the chances of him being a starter, 0. The other thing AJ was really good about setting the table about, and I'm not sure if he was just being nice or he was using it as a precursor for Ty Madden to understand what the job is for the next 3 weeks, which is, hey, come up here. We're going to tweak you and figure out how to optimize you. And you've been really good about accepting instruction in the last month. That's kind of what he said. Or he was telling him that that's what he needs to do. All right, let's not talk about Ty Madden anymore because it's a terrible thing to have to discuss a guy with an 8 run average in multiple innings in Toledo. It's just insane. All right, Javier Báez on the DL again. Seems like it's his back now causing, issues with other parts of his body, specifically the hip. Chance that we see him again this year, and, we can discuss the postseason, Javier Báez in the postseason, but you think we see him again this year?
Yeah, I'm not so sure we see Javier Báez again. The Tigers haven't ruled him out for the remainder of the season. But again, when you talk about it being a lumbar spine and hip inflammation and the fact that he has been on the injured list before for the lower back, the hip issue is somewhat new, but it's believed to be related to the recurring back issue. So when you combine all those things, it just doesn't sound great for Javier Báez. He went on the 10-day injured list with, again, like I said, lumbar spine and hip inflammation before Friday's opener of the 4-game series against the Chicago White Sox. He was able to have his moment at Wrigley Field. He had his first game back since the Cubs traded him to the New York Mets at the 2021 trade deadline. In his first game back at Wrigley Field, he went 0 for 4 with 4 strikeouts. It was not a great return to Wrigley Field for Javier Báez. And then before the series against the White Sox, he goes on the injured list. And so, I don't know. We'll see if he comes back or not, but it just doesn't seem likely when you consider that it's the same back issue that he's been dealing with over and over and over again. And now it's impacting the hip. And it just seems like the body in its entirety is breaking down. So they haven't ruled him out for the rest of the season, but I don't think he's going to be coming back. We'll see what happens. I'm not ruling him out either, but it just doesn't seem likely. As for Javier Báez, hitting 184 with 6 home runs, 12 walks, 69 strikeouts across 80 games in 2024, all while making $25 million in his 3rd season with the Tigers. He's had the back issues before. He's owed $73 million from 2025 to 2027 to complete the 6-year, $140 million contract. OPS has gotten worse in each season. Do the Tigers cut ties with Javier Báez in the offseason? I don't think so. But that's a conversation we can have in the offseason because it's not happening right now. And if it's going to happen, it's going to happen at some point in the offseason. I just don't think it's happening now. I think if there is surgery, if that does happen, if he has back surgery, I'm sure the Tigers will be interested to see what they can get from Javier Báez post-surgery, if there needs to be a surgical procedure. If not, and it's rest and rehab, I'm sure the Tigers are going to be at least a little bit curious at, can he come back and can he be healthy? Or is he going to have more back issues, down the road? You'd have to think that if it's just rest and recovery, there's going to be more back issues. If it's a surgery, maybe something different happens. Maybe he can heal from the back issues that he's been dealing with for now several years. We'll see what happens. There's a lot that remains to be seen, including his status for the rest of the 2024 season, because we don't know yet. But it's a lot of money on the table. We'll see what the Tigers, end up doing. But right now, I think Javier Báez sticks as a Tiger. I don't think we see him back again in 2024, but I do think we see him again in 2025.
I'll bring one business aspect to this decision, and that is very curious. The Tigers have an insurance policy on Javier Báez's contract, because if they do, he'll be back. He may never play another game, but they're not going to DFA him because back injuries are very, very, very difficult to come back from. especially when you play shortstop. Back surgeries really strangely don't work very often. Take my word for it. And if the Tigers can get a huge part of that contract paid for by an insurance company after a 60 or 90-day elimination period, you can bet that's on their mind right now. So a little something inside baseball kind of in thinking about Javier Báez. I'll be curious what the answer is. All right, Reese Olson's going to throw another bullpen and then probably have a rehab start, hopefully within the next 10 days. Is that the short version of where we're at with Reese Olson?
Yeah, 2 bullpens down. We'll see how many more he needs, if he needs a live BP, what that kind of looks like. But Reese Olson should be getting out on a rehab assignment at some point soon. He believes and he fully expects that he will return in September with hopefully multiple starts in September. So if that's truly the case, he's going to have to get on a rehab assignment pretty soon in order to get back to the Tigers in time to make more than one MLB start before the end of the 2024 season. But the Tigers expect Reese Olson to be back. Reese Olson expects to be back. He's going to have to do a rehab assignment of some type. This is a right shoulder strain. You got to be careful. You don't want to re-injure the shoulder. That's something that you just don't want to mess with. So they're going to play it safe. But Reese Olson believes he'll be back. He's got 2 bullpens down. We'll see where it goes from there and how quickly he's going to be able to make a start for Toledo. Probably multiple starts for Toledo, and then hopefully finish out with the Tigers here in the big leagues before the 2024 season ends.
Yeah. Wouldn't be shocked if they actually saw him throw well and then said, okay, go home now. You seem fine. All right. This has now been the longest Days of Roar in history. And, I love talking to you, but it's time for us to get out of here. So please like, rate, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, your mom's basement, I don't care where, but listen to it. And you can always find us embedded in every single Evan Petzold article at freep.com. I'm sure they're giving away great digital subscriptions this week. I'd like to thank the Free Press editor, Nicole Avery Nichols, our producer, the man, the magic one, Robin Chan. Love to my grandson, Braden Michael Gorash. And of course, the spectacular Savannah Petzold. Till next week, peace.